Meeting of the Federal Communications Commission. Please rise as our tradition and join me in saying the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. Madam Secretary, will you please introduce this month's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 4 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking seeking comment on reforms to the Lifeline program to ensure that federal dollars go to eligible Americans, enhance program integrity, and ensure that service providers comply with the Commission's rules. Second, you will consider a report in order to maximize the potential of the 900 megahertz band. Third, you will consider a public notice to propose an application limit in upcoming NCE reserved band FM translator filing window. Fourth, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking that would seek comment on proposed reforms to intercarrier compensation, inter-exchange services, and CAF-ICC support aimed at accelerating network deployment and modernization. This is your agenda for today. Today's first item is titled Strengthening the Integrity of the Lifeline Program and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Joseph Calachon, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that would initiate important reforms to the Lifeline program. I'd like to thank the Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues throughout the Commission for their contributions and review. Joining me at the table from the Wireline Competition Bureau are Kara Voth, Deputy Bureau Chief, Brian Boyle, Deputy Chief of the Bureau's Telecommunications Access Policy Division, and Eric Wu, Attorney Advisor in the division, who will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would seek comment on proposals to ensure that Lifeline services are used to benefit qualifying low-income Americans by classifying Lifeline as a federal public benefit under the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, which would restrict the Lifeline benefit to U.S. citizens and qualified aliens. It proposes collecting the full 9-digit Social Security number from applicants and using the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements program, otherwise known as the SAVE program, to support household eligibility verifications. The notice further proposes and seeks comment on requiring secondary verification of a consumer's consent to enroll in Lifeline or transfer to a new eligible telecommunications carrier. Additionally, the notice seeks comment on rule changes to optimize program integrity and efficiency, including whether to continue to permit the opt-out states to use their own verification processes and whether the Commission should reduce annual reporting burdens for ETCs. Finally, the notice proposes and seeks comment on streamlining the Lifeline rules, including deleting Emergency Broadband Benefit Program and Affordable Connectivity Program rules and minimizing stakeholder confusion. The Bureau recommends adoption of this notice of proposed rulemaking and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Today's item proposes significant changes that will unnecessarily weaken the Lifeline program and undermine its ability to ensure affordable connectivity for consumers under the guise of preventing waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, when it comes to federal funds, I strongly support improving program integrity and holding providers and administrators accountable where fraud occurs, but not at the expense of those that Lifeline is intended to serve. I refuse to support measures that erect barriers to enrollment for eligible households in ways that the record has not demonstrated are necessary. This is especially troubling because $9.25 per month is not sufficient support to begin with. Rather than nickel and diming families, we should be discussing how to expand the program and provide greater support for affordability modeled after the success of the Affordable Connectivity Program. That being said, I want to acknowledge that this item does ask some helpful questions about the IG's specific recommendations for addressing actual instances of fraud due to enrollment of deceased individuals and duplicate enrollment. Focusing on these targeted recommendations is beneficial for program integrity. I concur in part with respect to these actions in the item. I would like to acknowledge the Wireline Competition Bureau for their work on this item, and I thank the Chair's office for working with me on edits to improve the item. Now I want to turn to the item's proposals that will make it harder for low-income consumers to access Lifeline benefits. Creating enrollment barriers and otherwise paring down the program to reduce the number of eligible households to participate in the program in an effort to bring down the USF contribution factor fundamentally misunderstands and undermines compliance with Congress's direction to the FCC to provide universal service. In the 1996 Telecom Act, Congress provided the Commission with guiding principles for universal service policy. These included promoting the availability of quality services at just, reasonable, and affordable rates for all consumers, increasing access to advanced telecommunications services, and advancing the availability of such services to all consumers, including those in low-income areas. Turning our backs on low-income consumers now shows not only a defiance of Congress's mandate, but also utter disregard for the state of today's economy. Americans today are struggling to afford daily life, with nearly half the country saying groceries, utility bills, healthcare, housing, and transportation are difficult to afford. This administration's policy choices have failed across the board to deliver on the promise of affordability. This administration has made significant cuts to SNAP, Medicaid, federal work-study, and student financial aid programs. They instituted tariffs that increased grocery prices, and they are advocating for cuts to federal assistance for energy bills and rent. The proposal before us is just the next move in a systemic effort by this administration to eviscerate federal support for low-income consumers across the country. This is not a war on poverty, it's a war on the poor. Empty promises of trickle-down economics leading to marginally lower phone bills is of little comfort to households who will no longer be eligible for Lifeline support and will unequivocally face higher phone and internet bills despite already struggling to make ends meet. This is especially troubling in the wake of the lapse of funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program, which left millions of households without $30 in monthly support. In the absence of ACP, Lifeline has served as the only remaining resource for families struggling to afford connectivity. This item threatens to exacerbate the affordability issues and difficult choices that families will have to make to stay connected and will leave some families behind altogether. Aside from the direct impact on households, this item ignores the overall economic impact of failing to invest in affordability. Prioritizing affordable connectivity means investing in the next generation of Americans and ensuring they have the tools to participate in and contribute to our digital economy. As of 2024, 28 million American households did not have access to high-speed broadband, 18 million of which were not connected because they could not afford it. Broadband affordability and subsequent adoption have significant impacts on the economy. A 10% increase in broadband adoption can lead to a 1.2% increase in per capita GDP growth. The economic benefits are also visible across sectors. Telemedicine significantly reduces healthcare costs. Increased broadband access is linked to increases in lifetime earnings potential. The economic and social benefits of affordable connectivity should be part of our cost-benefit analysis when making changes to the Lifeline program. Some of the item's proposals rely on the claim that approximately 2 million individuals were unlawfully assigned Social Security numbers in 2024. However, this item does not even assert that any of those individuals were enrolled in Lifeline, whether their participation led to quantifiable losses, or explain how any of the proposed actions would address that issue. The Inspector General's findings regarding Lifeline integrity focused overwhelmingly on administrative deficiencies and provider and agent misconduct, not on subscriber eligibility. The recommendations for addressing fraud were targeted and directly related to two key issues: enrollment of deceased individuals and duplicate enrollment. The IG did not recommend raising eligibility thresholds or imposing additional burdens on consumers. Punishing eligible families fundamentally misdiagnoses the problem and risks undermining a program designed to help low-income households stay connected. Let's start with this item's proposals what these items proposals would do to participation in the program. Though a secondary consent verification process sounds good on paper, in practice it creates more friction in the enrollment and transfer processes. Research across public benefit programs shows that even small procedural hurdles can materially reduce participation among eligible populations, particularly among individuals with unstable housing, no pre-existing connectivity, limited digital literacy, or inconsistent device access. As of 2021, more than 33 million households qualify for Lifeline, but only 20% are enrolled. That is not evidence of rampant abuse. It is evidence of a program that is already underreaching those that Congress intended it to serve. A smaller percentage of eligible people are utilizing Lifeline compared to the most other federal benefit programs. By comparison, Medicaid has a participation rate of 84% and SNAP has a participation rate of 51%. Our response should not be to make enrollment in Lifeline even more difficult for consumers. The proposal to turn the one per household eligibility threshold into a one per residence requirement is cruel and punitive. It reflects a lack of knowledge about the experience of being poor. Rather than going after administrative deficiencies and provider misconduct, it focuses on narrowing eligibility and reducing the number of households participating in the program. At a time when homelessness has hit a record high, this policy is all the more concerning. Government entities like the Social Security Administration have made accommodations to ensure unhoused individuals and those without a stable address can still receive benefits. Instead of modernizing the Lifeline program to provide similar assistance to people who need it most, the FCC proposes to reduce eligibility for those who live in multi-generational or multi-family households, have addresses on tribal lands, live in group homes, or are unhoused. A one per residence requirement will strip affordability support away from those who do not have a stable address and those living at the same address as multiple other eligible households. The impact of this policy is inherently discriminatory. Asian, Black, and Hispanic Americans are far more likely than white Americans to live in multi-generational households. And Indigenous people experience homelessness at nearly 5 times the rate of others in the United States. Taking support away from these vulnerable populations is inequitable and indefensible. The Commission fails to demonstrate how narrowing eligibility for the program and erecting barriers to enrollment will help address the Inspector General's findings of fraud. It also fails to justify how its proposals will improve fiscal outcomes relative to administrative burdens and costs. The proposal to apply the restrictions of the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act to the Lifeline program is largely an administrative redundancy and poses a risk of erroneous deprivation of benefits. The vast majority of participants qualify for Lifeline through SNAP and Medicaid, programs that already incorporate the eligibility verification standards, including the 5-year waiting period established in the Act. The item proposes using scarce universal service dollars to pay to use the DHS Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlements database to verify the eligibility of legal immigrants, duplicating the verification carried out by other programs through which consumers qualify for Lifeline. The Inspector General made clear that the Treasury's Do Not Pay database, which can be used by the FCC free of charge, is an adequate tool for identifying deceased individuals and preventing their enrollment in the program, the real source of fraud. Instead, the proposal seeks to take federal funds out of the Universal Service Fund that should be going to consumers to pursue verification completely untethered to any identified source of fraud. Every dollar spent on administrative barriers is a dollar not directed towards supporting affordability for eligible recipients. In addition to creating a costly and administratively burdensome redundant effort, the use of DHS's SAVE database is highly concerning because the database itself has serious integrity issues. A recent report by ProPublica and the Texas Tribune found that the SAVE database flagged citizens as non-citizens at an alarming rate. For example, Boone County, Missouri began using the SAVE database to ensure proper voter registration. Local government officials have found that the SAVE database has out-of-date immigration information and often misidentifies citizens as non-citizens. The FCC proposal to use the database poses a significant risk of erroneously depriving eligible Lifeline subscribers of their benefits. Moreover, any time the SAVE database flags an individual as a non-citizen, even when it does so inaccurately, the individual may be referred to DHS for immigration enforcement purposes. The FCC's use of a database with such inaccuracies to flag targets for immigration enforcement raises serious concerns. It is difficult to ignore the partisan undertones of immigration-related policy proposals that are untethered to demonstrated program integrity issues. As an independent agency, the FCC should not be weaponizing its regulatory authority to advance unrelated immigration policies to score points with this administration, particularly when doing so conflicts with the expertise and institutional knowledge of the agency. And importantly, erecting barriers to the Lifeline program exemplifies a failure to ensure affordability that will disproportionately impact those who need the support the most, deepening existing economic and social inequalities across the country. For these reasons, I concur in part and dissent in part.
Thank you, Commissioner. We now turn to comments from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. Quality services should be available at just, reasonable, and affordable rates. That is the first principle Congress gave the FCC to guide universal service policy. Since its creation in the mid-1980s, the Lifeline program has played an important role in the Commission's efforts to fulfill its statutory mission, to make communication services available to all Americans. Lifeline has enabled countless households to afford the communication services necessary to participate in modern life, but the program has faced persistent fraud, waste, and abuse challenges. Improper Lifeline payments ultimately diminish the program's effectiveness and jeopardize the Commission's ability to expand connectivity benefits to eligible low-income individuals and families. Notwithstanding these issues, affordability continues to be a central component of the Universal Service Fund. As we look ahead, one important step to address shortcomings in current Lifeline verification processes is ensuring that the FCC complies with federal laws governing publicly funded benefits. The public should not be asked to support benefits provided in violation of federal statutes. Last year, President Trump called on agencies to ensure compliance with the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996, and this notice appropriately seeks comment on how this statute could apply here. The notice also invites comment on additional steps to strengthen stewardship of public funds through our Lifeline program, including several recommendations from the FCC's Office of Inspector General aimed at preventing waste, fraud, and abuse. I welcome stakeholder input as well on alternative approaches informed by practical experience with the Lifeline program that could target these objectives more efficiently and more effectively. It's now been 30 years since the 1996 Act directed the FCC to ensure that quality services should be available at just, reasonable, and affordable rates. In addition to the actions we are taking today, I look forward to working with Congress through its bipartisan bicameral USF working group to modernize universal service and promote affordability for the next 30 years and beyond. I thank the Wireline Competition Bureau for its work on this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Each year, Americans contribute more than $8 billion to support the FCC's universal service programs, including Lifeline. And Lifeline alone is a nearly $1 billion per year program that helps low-income Americans afford basic phone and internet services. With this amount of funding comes an equally large responsibility on those of us in government. The FCC must be a good steward of those federal dollars and a vigilant administrator of its USF programs. However, a recent Inspector General advisory identified serious integrity issues in the FCC's Lifeline program, including benefits being claimed for dead people and others who are not lawfully eligible under federal law. In fact, in just 3 opt-out states alone, states where the national verifier wasn't used for eligibility, the Inspector General found that nearly $5 million went to provide phone or internet service to more than 116,000 dead people. Over 80% of those scams took place in California alone.
My position on this is clear. To receive federal subsidies like Lifeline, you must be both a living and lawful beneficiary. The government should not be spending the money of hardworking Americans to provide phone and internet service to dead people. While California has tried to downplay these findings as an unfortunate reality in their view of administering a large public program where people die, the facts show something else entirely. The Inspector General's advisory shows that 40,000 people, or nearly 35% of the relevant people or zombies, died or may have died before enrollment. And as of February 1st, nearly 9,000 of them were still receiving subsidies despite having died at some point between 2020 and 2025. I'm happy to report that as of today, every one of the deceased individuals identified by the Inspector General is being de-enrolled from the program. And just yesterday, the FCC announced enforcement actions aimed at bad actor providers. All of this underscores why the common sense reforms we put forward today are so necessary. Indeed, if adopted, these program changes would strengthen eligibility verification, close loopholes identified by the Inspector General, and restore confidence in Lifeline so that the program can deliver for the families that Congress and the FCC have long intended to benefit. For all their great work, I'd like to thank the Bureau team that worked on this, including Mike Alonzo, Brian Boyle, Denise Golombowski, Sam Lewis, Ashley Tyson, Eric Wu, Kara Voth, Milena Barzilia, Joseph Calashone, Andrea Kelly, and Steve Feccarata. Thank you for your hard work, and thanks as well to the Inspector General and her team for compiling the important advisory that we are acting on today. With that, we will turn to a vote from the commission. Commissioner Gomez,
Concurrent part and dissent in part.
Commissioner Trusty.
Approve.
The chair votes to approve. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Maximizing the Potential of the 900 Megahertz Band and will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau. Joel Taubenblatt, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Chief, whenever you're ready, please proceed.
Excuse me. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireless Telecommunications Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a draft report and order that continues the Commission's efforts to make all 10 megahertz of the 900 megahertz band available for broadband use. I would like to thank the WTB team for their hard work, as well as our colleagues in OET, OEA, OGC, and other bureaus and offices. With me at the table are Jessica Quinley, Assistant Bureau Chief of the Wireless Bureau, and Alice Cothey and Morgan Mendenhall, Attorney Advisors in the Mobility Division of the Wireless Bureau. And Morgan will present the item this morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. This report and order would remove regulatory barriers to unleash the full potential of the 900 megahertz band to support broadband use across all 10 megahertz of the band via paired 5x5 megahertz broadband licenses. If adopted, this report and order would expand access to 900 megahertz spectrum for utilities, critical infrastructure, and other enterprises for private wireless broadband deployments that drive innovation and stimulate the American economy. By taking this action, the Commission would enable 900 megahertz users to increase their broadband capacity for more advanced and robust communication networks nationwide, allowing for grid modernization, real-time operational improvements, and continued safety innovation. In 2020, the Commission realigned the band to allow for paired 3 megahertz broadband licenses while accommodating incumbent narrowband licensees. This market-driven transition is ongoing and powered by private negotiations between narrowband incumbents and incoming broadband licensees. This report and order follows a similar framework, establishing a largely voluntary transition to 5x5 megahertz broadband on a county-by-county basis at a pace that best supports 900 megahertz users' operations. This item's rules for 5x5 megahertz licenses generally mirror 3x3 megahertz broadband, providing efficiency and certainty. The Bureau recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan, for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Demand for wireless connectivity continues to grow. That's an understatement. And one of those areas of growth is private wireless networks. These networks are being set up to serve enterprise, utilities, and critical infrastructure. Now, as the FCC assesses spectrum use and considers ways on how best to utilize this finite resource, we stay tuned to the opportunities to respond to demand. And that's exactly what we do in today's 900 megahertz order. Today, we expand the use of the 900 megahertz band to meet the demand of private wireless network use. We previously took action on this band to allow licenses to provide broadband service while maintaining the continuation of narrowband operations. And today, we allow a new type of license to broadband services in this band, for broadband services in this band, that will support industries that drive our economy while maintaining rules that protect current operations in and around the band. Thus, we choose both flexible spectrum use and economic prosperity. I want to thank the Wireless Telecommunication Bureau and everyone that worked on this for your creative work on this order.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now hear from Commissioner Trusty.
Thank you. Traveling across the country over the past 8 months, I have seen firsthand the many ways in which spectrum policy is profoundly shaping the U.S. economy and, in turn, the daily lives of American consumers. That impact extends to perhaps less visible but critically important sectors, including energy. Over the past year, policymakers have focused on unleashing domestic energy production to ensure affordable, reliable energy for American families and businesses. Realizing the full potential or promise of energy independence, however, requires an electric grid that can deliver power safely, securely, and reliably. Today's item helps bring utility operations into the digital age by updating the regulatory framework in the 900 megahertz band. This will enable more intensive broadband use by utilities and other critical infrastructure providers. This action builds on modernization efforts that began during President Trump's first administration, which permitted broadband deployment in 3x3 megahertz segments through a voluntary market-driven exchange process. Today, we take the next step by making the full 10 megahertz available for broadband deployment. This progress is significant. The 900 megahertz band provides vital spectrum access for utilities, critical infrastructure, and other business enterprises that have begun deploying private LTE and 5G networks over the past 6 years. These private broadband networks can enable smart metering, grid modernization, enhanced security and resilience, and the more precise delivery of essential electric, gas, and water services to all Americans. The record in this proceeding makes clear that utilities and critical infrastructure providers need additional spectrum and broadband access to expand current upgrades, harness emerging technologies, and support future applications. Importantly, this report and order allows the market to determine the highest and best use of the 900 megahertz band. Recognizing that narrowband operations remain essential for some users, the item relies on voluntary negotiations and market-based transactions to enable broadband deployment on a county-by-county basis. I expect these negotiations to proceed in good faith so that incumbents are made whole when relocating and the substantial benefits of broadband can be realized by prospective licensees. I thank the Wireless Bureau for your thoughtful work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. Restoring America's leadership in wireless is a key pillar of our Build America agenda. And when it comes to spectrum, we're executing on a two-pronged play to advance connectivity for every community in the country. Spectrum auctions are the first prong of our play. Thanks to President Trump, the FCC has its auction authority back, plus an 800 megahertz spectrum pipeline. And we've been making significant progress on these auctions. Last November, we advanced a proposal to auction a large swath of mid-band spectrum in the upper C-band, and work streams on additional auctions are active across the administration. Meanwhile, just a few months from now, we're set to auction AWS-3 spectrum that reaches hundreds of markets nationwide. As for the second prong, the FCC has been very active over the last year in facilitating secondary market transactions that allow competitors to put spectrum to higher and more productive uses. As a result, we're already seeing previously fallow spectrum loaded up with traffic. This is increasing speeds for consumers and coverage for Americans while driving down prices. Today's decision is another win for that second prong. Our vote today enables secondary market transactions in the 900 megahertz band so that licensees can acquire a full 10 megahertz to deliver high-speed broadband services. Historically, this spectrum was limited to narrowband offerings alone. Expanding broadband capabilities here promises new private wireless deployments across a range of sectors. And by establishing a voluntary, negotiation-driven process, we give operators the flexibility they need to drive efficient transitions through private agreements. It's exactly the type of market-based approach that accelerates deployment and makes spectrum work for the American people. For all the great work on the item, I'd like to thank the Bureau team, in particular Cameron Duncan, Alice Koth, Morgan Mendenhall, Roger Noel, Cambis Ranavardi, Jess Quinley, Nina Shaffron, Joshua Smith, Chief Taubenblatt, and Andrew Ware. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trusty.
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, thanks for the smattering of applause. Please announce, it's getting better, it's getting there. Please announce the next item on today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Proposing Application Limit in Upcoming NCE Reserved Band FM Translator Filing Window and will be presented by the Media Bureau. Aaron Boone, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Chief Boone, when you and your team are ready, please proceed.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Today, the Media Bureau presents a public notice to propose and seek comment on eligibility restrictions and a general 10 application limit for new non-commercial, educational, and reserved band FM translator stations filed in the upcoming 2026 filing window. Joining me are Al Schuldner, Lisa Scanlon, and Joe Cohen of the Media Bureau's Audio Division. Joe will present the item.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, we are pleased to present this public notice that proposes and seeks comment on establishing eligibility restrictions and a limit on the number of applications that each applicant may file in the first ever filing window for non-commercial, educational, reserved band FM translator station construction permits, which is tentatively scheduled for late 2026. The proposed general 10 application limit, which is consistent with the cap established for the 2007 and 2021 NCE FM filing windows, is intended to provide a meaningful opportunity for applicants to file for new NCE reserved band FM translator stations and expand service, while at the same time deter speculative applications and procedural delay and preserve spectrum for future secondary services. In both the 2007 and 2021 NCE FM filing windows, the Commission established a 10 application limit, which proved to be an effective procedural safeguard and helped restrict the number of mutually exclusive applications, prevented mass filings, and allowed the Commission to efficiently process and grant thousands of new NCE FM applications. We expect to receive a large volume of filings in the upcoming window due to several factors, including that there has never been a filing window for new NCE reserved band FM translator applications, and there are generally no ownership limits in the reserved FM band. The public notice tentatively concludes that establishing an application limit before the window opens will provide certainty to potential applicants and allow for the expeditious processing of applications. The public notice tentatively concludes that a general 10 application cap is a reasonable limit to prevent mass filings by speculators while still allowing legitimate applicants a meaningful opportunity to obtain new NCE reserved band FM translator station licenses. The public notice tentatively concludes that imposing a requirement that each applicant be the licensee or permittee of an existing NCE FM station, non-commercial AM radio station, or LPFM station that the proposed FM translator will rebroadcast will further these goals. Finally, the public notice seeks comment on whether the proposed 10 application cap and primary station eligibility restriction are appropriate limits, whether different eligibility restrictions or application caps would be more appropriate, or whether we should establish no limit or restrictions at all. The Media Bureau recommends that the Commission adopt this public notice and requests editorial privileges to make any necessary technical or conforming edits to the public notice. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe, for the presentation. We'll now turn to comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Promoting localism, competition, and diversity of voices are the core goals of the FCC's media policy. Empowering non-commercial educational radio stations to strengthen and widen their reach by inviting them to apply for translator station construction permits aids all three of these objectives. Consisting primarily of public broadcasting, college radio stations, and religious broadcasting stations, NCE stations make up a sizable portion of operational radio stations, as they are owned and operated by community organizations, schools, and places of worship. They are uniquely positioned to provide excellent localized programming. These organizations' presence in communities across the nation, coupled with their lack of commercial funding, allow them to provide critical, educational, cultural, and entertainment programs that are specific and relevant to the communities they serve. With this first ever opportunity for NCE stations to apply to construct translator stations, the Commission supports their excellent work by allowing them to bring vital programming to broader audiences and keep step with commercial stations that already have access to translator and booster services. This action will also ensure that these community-based stations can provide their programming in areas where the natural environment inhibits the reception of radio services, such as rural and remote communities. I'm pleased that the Commission rightly recognizes the importance of NCE radio stations to communities across the nation and will aid them in enhancing their programming's reach. I want to thank the Media Bureau staff for their excellent work on this important item.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trustee.
Well, thank you. I won't have a statement for this item, but I want to thank the Media Bureau for your thoughtful work here. Thank you.
Today, we take steps to launch the first ever filing window for FM translator stations in the band reserved for non-commercial radio service. The FM translator service was created over 50 years ago, but this window will mark the first opportunity for non-commercial FM, LPFM, and AM stations to obtain new FM translator stations. This will particularly benefit educational broadcasters to allow them to extend the programming their stations provide to the public and reach remote, rural, and underserved communities. Today, we seek comment on how to tailor this upcoming window. We explore eligibility requirements and application limits to prevent gamesmanship and preserve the airwaves for future local and community-focused services. I look forward to seeing the positive results of this unique window and the continued growth for non-commercial service in the FM band. For all their great work on the item, I'd like to thank the team again, Jim Bradshaw, Joseph Cohen, Lisa Scanlon, Al Schuldener, Aaron Boone, Amy Vander get this right, Kirklove. Did I get close? Okay. All from the Media Bureau. So thanks to the team for their great work on that. We'll now turn to a vote. Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee.
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 4 on your agenda is titled Reforming Intercarrier Compensation and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau. Joseph Calichon, Bureau Chief, will give the introduction.
Chief, when you and the team are ready, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would take the next step in modernizing the regulatory framework for voice services and support the transition to all IP networks. I'd like to thank the entire Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues in the Consumer and Governmental Affairs and Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureaus, and the Offices of International Affairs, Economics and Analytics, and Communications Business Opportunities, as well as General Counsel. Seated at the table with me are Allison Baker, Associate Bureau Chief, Lynn Engeldow, Chief of the Bureau's Pricing Policy Division, Irina Osaskov and Eric Raven Hansen, Assistant Chiefs in the division, Chris Coves, Associate Chief in the division, and Arthur Lechtman, Attorney Advisor in the Office of International Affairs. Eric Raven Hansen will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would seek comment on proposals and reforms to accelerate network deployment and modernization by eliminating regulations that hinder the transition from time division multiplexing, or TDM networks, to all IP networks. Specifically, the notice proposes to move all remaining intercarrier access charges to a bill and keep framework. In addition, the notice would propose and seek comment on eliminating ex-ante pricing regulation and on de-tariffing end-user charges. It would also seek comment on eliminating regulations that would no longer be necessary after these transitions complete, and on sunsetting legacy interstate and international long-distance carrier obligations and reporting requirements that are no longer relevant in today's communications marketplace. Likewise, the notice would seek comment on phasing out Connect America Fund intercarrier compensation universal service support after the transition to bill and keep is complete, thereby ensuring that carriers have sufficient resources to successfully transition to bill and keep and IP networks. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item and requests editorial privileges. Thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. We'll now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Today, we continue our work to modernize our communications framework by considering how best to complete the transition from legacy intercarrier compensation systems to a full bill and keep model. For years, we have encouraged providers to invest in faster, more resilient networks. Modernization also requires us to revisit rules written for a very different technological era. The current intercarrier compensation regime was built around circuit switch networks and per minute charges, a structure that no longer reflects how Americans communicate today. This item seeks comment on how to remove outdated incentives, align our policies with today's IP-based marketplace, and ensure the transition is handled thoughtfully and responsibly. I thank the chairman for his leadership on this effort. I thank the Bureau for your long, patient briefing, and as well as for your hard work on this item, as well as everyone else in the commission's hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Trustee.
Thank you. The transition to advanced communications networks promises significant benefits for consumers. Those benefits include enhanced service quality, greater innovation and competition, stronger public safety capabilities, and improved resiliency. The transition will also help protect our communications infrastructure from threats ranging from coordinated attacks to copper theft. Today's notice builds on the IP interconnection NPRM the Commission issued in October. Taken together, these proceedings position the FCC to address several key aspects of IP interconnection, from the governing policy framework to technological solutions to elements of the cost recovery framework in an all IP environment. Clear guidance in these areas through coordinated action in those and other proceedings will be essential to sustain continued network investment throughout the IP transition. I'm pleased to see this item build on lessons learned from prior reforms. The Commission's adoption of bill and keep for many forms of intercarrier compensation provides important context for the proposals here. Likewise, the FCC's substantial deregulation of the domestic long-distance market suggests it is appropriate to consider whether any remaining requirements should be eliminated and whether similar deregulation should extend to international long-distance. Another important lesson learned from past reforms is the value of industry collaboration. Industry participants are often best positioned to understand the operational and competitive realities on the ground. The Commission has previously relied on stakeholder proposals when shaping intercarrier compensation and universal service reforms, and this item wisely seeks that input again. In particular, in all of our proceedings addressing the IP transition, I welcome industry proposals that help the Commission thoughtfully implement reforms needed to facilitate technological and marketplace evolution while fully accounting for our universal service responsibilities. Where the Commission relies on networks to meet our universal service goals, it's important to ensure that the move to advanced networks does not inadvertently undermine connectivity or affordability. Advancing the transition to IP-based networks is a vital step toward restoring U.S. leadership in next-generation communications technologies. By working together, we can ensure this transition is both smooth and timely. I thank the Wireline Competition Bureau for its hard work on this item, and thanks to OIA as well.
Thank you, commissioners. Completing the transition to all IP networks will unlock real benefits for consumers. It will mean more investment in next-gen networks. It will mean more effective solutions to combat illegal robocalls. It will mean modern competitive technologies instead of slow legacy networks built for a bygone era. But for too long, outdated regulatory frameworks have skewed market incentives and slowed down the IP transition. It's time to remove these barriers and pave the way for new deployments. Today's item keeps this momentum going by exploring how we can reform legacy intercarrier compensation rules and eliminate regulatory obligations that just don't make sense anymore. At the same time, we know this transition can't be sloppy or rushed. As reflected in the item we're voting on today, the Commission will be moving forward in this proceeding in a thoughtful way, mindful of the complex issues, transition timelines, and paramount connectivity goals. That's why we're inviting meaningful collaboration from industry, our federal partners, and consumer groups on how to move the remaining pieces of intercarrier access and related rules to a bill and keep approach in a smart, practical way. Bottom line, we want to finish the job and do it right. I'd like to thank the team again for all their great work on another item, getting us one step closer to that goal. Thanks to Chief Calashone, Allison Baker, Lynn Ingledow, Irina Asoskov, Christopher Coves, Eric Raven Hansen, Peter Bean, Marvin Sachs, Simon Soleimani, Shabir Hamid, and Sarah Ramju from the Wireline Bureau, as well as Richard Kwiatkowski from OEA, Melina Barzilay from OGC, and then Denise Koka, Arthur Leckman, Brendan Villanueva, and David Kretsch from OIA for all their hard work. It was a joint item, to be sure. And with that, we'll proceed to a vote on the item, starting with Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
Commissioner Trustee.
Approve.
The chair votes to approve as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Yeah, intercarrier comp. It's a good thing. At this point, would any of my colleagues like to make some announcements? I'll have some to come. I guess pile on to. First up for us is one big retirement at the agency. We want to congratulate our longtime managing director, Mark Stevens, on his upcoming retirement after 35 years of distinguished service. I don't know if Mark is here or is already taking advantage of the upcoming retirement, looks like. Over his tenure, Mark oversaw the agency's budget, HR, contracts, IT, facilities, security, document distribution, basically keeping the commission running smoothly through busy periods, as well as probably too many shutdowns as well. After serving in the U.S. Navy, Mark joined the FCC in 1991, later becoming the chief financial officer of the agency in 2007, before managing director in 2016. His many honors include the FCBA Excellence in Government Award and the FCC's own Meritorious and Distinguished Service Medal. So we want to thank Mark for his leadership and his dedication to the FCC over all those many years and wish him the very best in his retirement. With Mark leaving, there are big shoes to fill, and thankfully we are turning to Dan Daly, who will serve as the new managing director succeeding Mark. With 2 decades of leadership experience already in the Office of Managing Director, Dan has served as senior counsel for financial operations, chief of staff, and most recently, deputy managing director. Dan brings deep expertise and commitment to the managing director position, He brings his expertise and a proven ability to manage the commission's complex operations. So we are really looking forward to Dan filling those shoes in and picking up right where Mark have left off. Finally today, the passing of one of our really beloved and former FCC colleagues. We're saddened to announce the passing of Julie Veach, someone who made a truly lasting impact on this agency, on the communications bar, and frankly, on the American people more broadly. Julie is someone that I first met when I joined the FCC all the way back in 2012. She was already Deputy General Counsel at the time. She then moved on to become Wireline Bureau Chief, and she's one of those rare people that you encounter in this bar and probably in life, who was brilliant, who was kind, who was always had time to sort of ask you how you were doing and find a personal moment, and made such a tremendous impact on the work of this building. As indicated, she served here for more than 14 years, including as Chief of the Wireline Bureau, Deputy General Counsel, before becoming a partner at HWG. She helped shape foundational broadband and universal service policies and was widely admired for her intellect, her integrity, and most importantly, I think, as a generosity as a mentor. We send our condolences to her husband who's here, Roger, to her 2 kids, Lewis and Kobe, who I had the chance to speak with briefly before the meeting. And they are real stars and talented kids, and so much to be proud of right there. And so just want to thank all of you for remembering Julie, thank her for all of her contributions, and thank her family for what incredible contributions she's had for so many people. So thanks. With that, one of my colleagues, anything else to add? Great. Okay, with that, Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, March 26, 2026.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
Check 1, 2, testing 1, 2. You got me? All right.
All right, everybody, we'll be starting the chairman's press conference momentarily. So if you could please take a seat and take your conversations outside, I'd greatly appreciate it. As a reminder, if you could please identify your name and your outlet, and we are trying to go to one question a person, please. And so with that, I'm going to hand this off to the chairman of the FCC, Brendan Carr. Thank you.
Thanks. It's great to be back here at the podium. It feels like a shorter break between open meetings, at least much shorter than we had over the New Year's. But it's great to be back again. We've stayed really busy in their intervening time, as you saw from this meeting. In particularly, I am very proud of the actions that the FCC took today to strengthen the integrity of the federal Lifeline program. I think the waste, the fraud, the abuse identified by the FCC's Inspector General last month is completely unacceptable. $5 million went to providing phone and internet service to dead people. Over 94,000 people alone in California. That's over 80% of all the scams identified in the Inspector General report came out of California. As I said in my statement this morning, the government should not be spending the money of hardworking Americans to pay for phone and internet service for dead people. Apparently, this is a controversial position, but we're not going to stop. We're going to keep everything going to make sure that we root out the waste, the fraud, and the abuse in that program. With that, happy to turn it over and take some questions.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, John Hind with Politico. Wanted to ask about how you think your equal time guidance has been going so far over the last few weeks. Specifically, curious, at this point, is there any concern that there could be, fewer voices on air because of that? I'm curious how you're seeing the Colbert incident this week. Obviously there was an interview that was not aired at this point. Are you at all concerned that companies might, look at the situation and, simply choose not to mess with that at all? Like, where does that all fit right now when you're looking at things now, just a few weeks into the new guidance?
Well, look, when I step back and look at the entire arc of the news story yesterday, I was highly entertained. I think it was probably one of the most fun days I've had on the job, watching sort of the hilarity of how this story played out. I mean, look, anybody that's, not suffering from a terminal case of Trump derangement syndrome could see right away yesterday the exact story arc and how it was going to play out. You had a Democrat candidate who understood the way that the news media works, and he took advantage of all of your sort of prior conceptions to run a hoax, apparently for the purpose of raising money and getting clicks. And the news media played right into it. I think yesterday was a perfect encapsulation of why the American people have more trust in gas station sushi than they do in the national news media. And this was very plainly an effort ginned up to get clicks and to raise money. And you guys ate it up like slop. And when it was pointed out that the facts were completely different than what the fake news media was running with, nobody did like an about face and did a fact correction. They just pivoted and moved away. And again, I think this is why the American people simply don't trust the news media anymore. As Jasmine Crockett herself came out yesterday afternoon and said, there was no censorship by the government here. What she said was a reflection of what CBS itself had said, which they advised Colbert, there's lots of ways you can do this, including having all the legally qualified candidates on. But for some reason, they chose not to do this. Congress passed the equal time provision for a very specific reason. They didn't want the media elites in Hollywood and New York to put their thumb on the scale and pick the winners and losers in primaries and general elections. That's the whole point. And I get it that people may not like that, but that's the law that Congress passed. At the end of the day, this is about empowering individual people to vote and decide for themselves who they want to represent them. The whole idea here is more speech, not less. You can have more candidates on. There is zero censorship with the equal time provision. It's about empowering people. But again, there was one partisan candidate who fed this slop to the mainstream national news media, and you guys ran for it with ours. And I was just laughing because I was watching, and it was clear that this story is going to turn at some point, and the truth is going to come out. But I thought it was just interesting to observe as sort of a microcosm of the lack of trust in the media.
Jeremy Barr from The Guardian, 14-part question. I mean, just really quickly, the first one, has the FCC opened a probe into The View over the equal time rule and potential violations because of Tellerico's interview earlier this month?
Yes, the FCC has an enforcement action underway on that, and we're taking a look at it.
I mean, on the Colbert matter, is your take that basically any time Colbert or The View or Kimmel has a politician on, that the equal time rule applies, or does it depend on the content of the interview? I mean, if Colbert, sort of acts like David Muir and does a very straight interview, does it still apply, or is it just your contention that these shows are political shows and therefore they'd have to have the other candidates on? And what do you think about the argument that, there's a logistical issue here, that if you have one candidate on, having to have on like 7 other primary candidates would make it impossible to even have candidates on at all? Is there a reasonable concern that this would make it sort of unwieldy to be able to have politicians on these shows?
Well, look, I think, Colbert is no David Muir. I think that's sort of obvious. The general rule as passed by Congress is the equal time provision. If you're going to have a legally qualified candidate on, you have to give comparable time and airtime to all other legally qualified candidates, and we're going to apply that law. They have not come forward with a petition trying to determine whether they can satisfy the exception to that, which is for bona fide news. Again, if anybody wants to file a petition with the FCC to qualify for the bona fide news exception, they can do that. But neither Disney on The View nor the Colbert Show have come forward with a filing seeking or showing and demonstrating that they qualify for the bona fide news exception, and they're welcome to do that, but they haven't done that yet.
Matt Danneman, Communications Daily. Just one question. IP transition-wise, to shift topics for 1 second, beyond the pair of proceedings the FCC has now, do you anticipate, are there other areas of IP transition that the FCC anticipates doing action on with NPRMs and proceedings this year? Are there still areas where the agency, beyond those 2 proceedings, where the agency can incentivize IP transition?
Yeah, look, to do the IP transition right, you've got to do probably 30 plus things right. And we're doing that. You can see it in some of our accessibility rulemakings, where we're making sure that we're transitioning programs to an IP future. You can see it in the items today with intercarrier compensation. So again, there's a range of things we have to do right. We've probably got underway the vast majority of what we need to do in terms of proceedings, but there's still maybe another couple ones where we have to complete the transition in an individual area. Yeah.
Chairman Ted Johnson from Deadline. 2 very related questions. Apologies, but why do you not have the same concern about broadcast talk radio as broadcast TV talk shows? For example, Sean Hannity's show featured Ken Paxton in December. And the other question is, how is the FCC assessing whether a candidate appearance on a talk show is motivated by partisan purposes?
Well, look, the equal time rule applies to all broadcasters. The particular equal time notice that we put out walked through a number of precedents that applied in the TV context, where we had seen that it appeared that programmers were either overreading or misreading some of the case law on the equal time rule as it applies to broadcast TV. We haven't seen the same issues on the radio side, but the equal time rule is going to apply to broadcast across the board, and we'll take a look at anything that arises at the end of the day.
And then the question just about how you, in the guidance, it actually mentioned, you will assess whether a candidate appearance on a talk show is motivated by partisan purposes. What criteria are you setting? Could that mean even a talk show host giving money to a political candidate in the past, or hosting a fundraiser?
Yeah, it's possible. All that could be relevant. The idea of being animated by a partisan political motivation is something that's been established in the FCC's case law on equal time for decades. And there's various different ways through discovery, other actions, that you can suss that out. People can come forward with their own showings in a petition for declaratory ruling, but this is something that will be explored as part of the FCC's case law. And the idea is that if you're a partisan political actor under the case law, then you're likely not going to qualify under the bona fide news exception. And that's okay. It just means you have to either provide equal airtime to the different candidates, or there's different ways you can get your message out, again, through streaming services and other means for which the equal time rule doesn't apply.
And just to clarify, a partisan political actor would mean a talk show host or someone whose show it is.
Could be that, yeah, could be that.
Hi, Diego Munoz from Punchbowl News. A quick clarification and then a question. Just does the rule apply to every single House member, given they are all up for re-election in November? And if a late night show or a morning show wants to interview one of them, they'll have to interview their competitors. And then the question is, on the Nexstar deal, will you issue a waiver, or are you going to raise the 39% ownership cap?
Well, on the equal time rule, right now, the relevant inquiry in most parts of the country is the primaries, not the general. And so, for instance, the claimed equal time issue in the Colbert instance had to do with Democrat on Democrat violence. This was about James Tallarico looking to get a sort of a click and a view and maybe a vote and a money boost over his two opponents in the Democrat primary. Now, another option that would have been available to Colbert was to run the exact interview that he wanted on air, but not run it on a station in Texas. That might have been another one of the options that he could have taken advantage of. But the rule right now, given where we are in the election cycle, is for primaries. And again, we're going to apply it according to the FCC's case law. With respect to Nexstar Tegna, I support that transaction. We're going to be moving forward with it here in terms of the exact document that we do that through. Stay tuned, and when we release it, you'll see it.
Hi, Chairman. Chris Cole with Law 360. I wanted to ask if you'd give any consideration to raising the Lifeline support amount for eligible households, because according to the National Lifeline Association, it's operating currently at less than 1/3 of its annual budget. So is it worth at least asking the question whether for eligible households, the support amount should be increased?
Well, I think in order of operations, step one should be to make sure that we're not increasing the amount of money to go to provide even more money for phone internet service to dead people. So step one has to be to get some of the fundamental waste, fraud, and abuse out of the system. And that's where our focus is at this point.
Chairman Carr, Dave Shepherdson from Reuters. Let me just follow up on a couple of the questions. So the guidance you gave said that none of the talk shows, the FCC has no evidence that any talk show on the air today would qualify for the bona fide news exemption. Can you sort of discuss a little bit more about the view, what you're doing? Is this a notice of, have you filed a notice of apparent liability, or what precisely this enforcement action looks like? And based on that investigation about the view, should the rest of the networks interpret that as if they opt not to file a petition and to put a candidate interview on the air, that the FCC would pursue down the same path and basically treat them how you're investigating the view?
Well, we are pursuing Disney's program, The View, as an enforcement matter at this point. In terms of the specifics of that, I don't want to provide more detail at this point than that, other than it's an enforcement matter that we're taking seriously, that we're pursuing. Every single broadcaster in this country has an obligation to be responsible for the programming that they choose to air. And they're responsible whether it complies with FCC rules or not. And if it doesn't, then those individual broadcasters are also going to have a potential liability there. Again, this is a rule that's been on the books for a long time, going back decades. If people don't like it, that's okay. They can go to Congress to try to change it. But our job is to make sure that we're faithfully applying the statutory requirements. And that's exactly what we're going to do. And if you want to be a bona fide news program, like a lot of the interview programs of years before, you're going to have to fit within the four corners of the bona fide news exception. And otherwise, you have to comply with the equal time requirements.
Does that mean you have to file a petition that the FCC is not going to treat anybody, any late night or daytime talk show, as a bona fide news program absent filing a petition and getting a ruling from the commission?
Well, look, again, historically, the way this worked is that shows would come to the FCC and they would describe the specifics, whether it's, the Tonight Show or the Today Show, and the FCC would issue a ruling based on the contours of that program as it existed. Now, if you flash forward 40 years and new hosts and new format and new style and new approach, the idea that you can rely on, a 40-year-old case law for the current iteration of the program, I don't know that that's supported. And so we've encouraged people to file petitions. Again, the ones that we've seen have yet to establish that they are qualifying for the bona fide news exception. The general rule is equal time applies. There's some narrow exceptions. You got to fit within those exceptions, though.
So have you gotten some petitions yet since the January guidance?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Anyway, and do you want to respond to Stephen Colbert, who said you were motivated by a desire to keep content off the air that makes fun of President Trump or that just Trump doesn't like?
What's so ironic about it is, had they gone down the path of complying with the equal time provisions here, it would have meant more airtime for more Democrats to say whatever those Democrats wanted. So again, this is part of the broader hoax that too many in the fake news media simply fell for, hook, line, and sinker. One partisan political candidate sent out a tweet that said the Trump administration refused to air a segment, as if that's something that we do. As the facts have come out, it's very clear what happened. CBS, in their own statement, says that they gave Colbert lots of ways they could do exactly what he wanted to do, but they chose not to do it. And it reminds me of that, I don't know how long you are, it reminds me of that meme where, someone with a bicycle takes a stick and pokes it through their own front wheel and they end up crashing, and then they, cry for help and for donations and for clicks and for views. And again, too many in the mainstream media simply fell for it. And I thought it was hilarious, again, all day, just watching the arc of this story. It was so clear where it was going to go. And it's why so many people don't trust the fake news media anymore. But look, I get it. It's tough to be Colbert. He's had what he probably views as a long and distinguished career in the limelight. He sees that limelight is fading, is coming to an end. That's got to be a difficult time for him. I get it. But that doesn't change the facts of what happened here. We do plan to enforce it. I mean, look, again, the facts here are very clear. CBS put out a statement yesterday saying that they provided guidance to the Colbert Show, that they could do the exact interview that he wanted to do. They could air it on broadcast, provided that they also provided airtime to all other legally qualified candidates. There's at least 2 others. So there was a clear path forward, even under CBS's own reading of the law, for them to do it. So there was no censorship here at all. But again, that's part of what the hoax that was out there, is that there was a partisan political candidate that wanted to claim censorship for purposes of getting views and clicks. And it was an effort to self-Streisand effect, and the media played right into it. And when the media was called out for it, they just pivot away and, ask other questions. But I think you guys should feel a bit ashamed for having been lied to and then just run with those lies. I think it was an embarrassing episode for the media. Yeah, again, there's lots of options here. You can have all the legally qualified candidates on. The broadcaster could provide comparable airtime, meaning potentially outside of the show entirely. It's just comparable airtime, comparable time and placement. And so we've seen this before, where you don't necessarily have to put the person on the same show at the same time. So if Colbert has a preference for one candidate over another, and I have no idea if he does, but if that's what his preference is, he can do that. But broadcasters have the obligation then to provide comparable time and placement. So one workaround is have one person on the show, comparable time and placement for others. Again, the rule is limited to the context of legally qualified candidates, which was here Texas. So you could also just run one candidate on stations outside of Texas. There's lots of options that they had, but the option that they chose was to create this hoax, I guess in an effort to gin up clicks, knowing that it would fit with so many of the priors of the people in the media, and that they would just run with the narrative. That's exactly what happened. So it was their decision to do this. There was lots of options, and we're going to, simply enforce the equal time rule.
Hi, Chairman. I'm Dan Novak. I'm with the National Law Journal. Just to follow up on the guidance, when the FCC said that there's no evidence that any late night or daytime talk show qualifies for the exemption, I'm just wondering how the FCC came to that conclusion. And if this is true, should stations just assume that partisan appearances now trigger equal opportunity requirements?
Look, every single station in the country, whether they're owned and operated or affiliates, you can make the argument, I guess, that an owned and operated station has a particular liability because of the unanimity of the corporate structure with the program itself. But our law is very clear. If you're an independent affiliate and you're running one of these programs, it is your responsibility as a licensee, as an affiliate, to make sure that you're complying with regulations. So if you see that there's a legally qualified candidate on a program that you've aired, the law says you need to quickly file a notice in your political file that this appearance took place. And then legally qualified candidates have the opportunity to seek it out. But again, the way it works is you file the notice and someone can seek it out. It doesn't require the candidate to seek it out. So this could also end in a way in which you make the required filing. No one takes advantage of the offer for you to get comparable placement and time, and it ends there. But the issue so far is you've had these appearances without that filing going in. So, great. Thanks all, appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman. And this will conclude our Chairman's press conference. Up next, I'm going to hand the reins over to my colleague, Will Whitequist, for the Bureau press conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. So next, we're going to be doing the Bureau press conference. We're going to be taking questions on the items voted on today, specific to those items with the Bureau. So I'll go through the items, ask if you have any questions. I'm guessing my dear friend at Com Daily probably will, and then we'll call up the bureaus accordingly. So I'm going to group the two Wireline Bureau items together. So if Wireline can come up, I can see they already have a question. So this is the Lifeline item and the intercarrier compensation item together.
Hi, Matt. Chief Tauchon, hi. On the Lifeline item, Commissioner Gomez indicated she had some changes made to the NPRM. Were there, beyond those, were there other material changes made to the item between the draft and what was just voted?
So the usual question. So yes, we did make a number of changes to the publicly circulated draft that you'll see when it comes out there. So we added a more robust cost benefit analysis, discussion on how secondary verifications could occur, especially for first-time Lifeline subscribers who don't already have access to text and email. Questions about ETC compliance plans, questions about non-compliant billing arrangements and usage requirements, as well as updates to the proposed deletions under the delete proceeding that is ongoing, removing ACP rules, EBB rules. That's mostly it.
And then same question, IP transition-wise, anything material?
For that, we updated the total CAF ICC disbursements based on the recently released USF monitoring report. Clarify the scope of carriers to which the long distance proposals would apply, and further discuss the interplay between the proposals in this notice and our universal service principles.
Any other questions on these items?
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So next up, we have questions for the Wireless Bureau. I assume the 900 megahertz item.
Chief Taubenblatt, Matt Daneman, Communications Daily. Same sort of question, any material changes from the item, specifically any changes related to issues GoGo had brought up to the Bureau? Thank you.
Yeah, so GoGo had filed an ex parte, and we did have some clarifying language that we added to the item with respect to our expectations for coexistence between the 5x5 broadband licensees and adjacent band licensees. Beyond that, I don't think there were any changes to the item.
Hi, Chief. Chris Cole with Law 360. Same question, but with respect to the American Association of Railroads. They had made numerous filings in this proceeding.
Same question in terms of were there changes in circulation?
Yeah, to incorporate changes that they had requested.
I don't think anything since circulation. So yeah, I mean, I think they certainly made a number of filings that we consider in the context of putting together the original draft that came out on circulation. But I don't think there are any changes with respect to those filings and the time from circulation draft to adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Last but certainly not least, Media Bureau. Aaron and all are here. It's the NCE item. Chief Boone.
I know who's going to have a question for me.
I don't even have to ask.
There were a few changes, but nothing hugely substantive. There was a couple of just cleanup things and clerical, really. Nothing, no policy changes.
Any other questions on this one? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks all. And with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Gomez. Thank you all.
Morning. Last time I stood before you, I said this FCC has transformed into a political arm of this administration. In the weeks since, that has only become clearer. First, political figures and partisan organizations who understand the power of this agency publicly called for an investigation into what was, by any objective measure, a routine Super Bowl halftime show. They spread misinformation about the lyrics and content in an effort to get this FCC to launch yet another baseless inquiry targeting perceived government critics. When I learned that the FCC had requested transcripts of the performance from NBC, I requested them as well. As the only native Spanish-speaking commissioner at this agency, I reviewed them carefully. And I found no violation of our rules and no justification for harassing broadcasters over a standard live performance. Then this week, The Late Show claimed that CBS declined to air a candidate interview as a result of political pressure from this FCC. While we don't know yet if the FCC had a direct role in this matter, I'd like to remind you all that we would not be in this situation had the agency not issued misleading guidance meant to intimidate these shows from airing newsworthy interviews. Let me be clear. This agency has no lawful authority to lean on broadcasters or to create an atmosphere where they feel they have to pull back from lawful speech. And when companies decide to step back from airing newsworthy content because of that pressure, it does real damage to public trust and to the First Amendment principles we are sworn to uphold. For months, we've seen this FCC decry the politicization of media, yet it weaponizes the power of this agency for entirely political purposes. And what's lost under this new and extreme direction is its focus on consumers. Under the guise of combating waste, fraud, and abuse, the Commission today voted to open a proceeding that threatens to weaken the Lifeline program, which is one of the last remaining tools to help low-income families afford connectivity. Instead of expanding access at a time of real affordability challenges, this proposal erects new barriers, risks reducing participation in the program, and will ultimately raise phone and internet costs for the very households Congress directed us to lawfully serve. We are seeing this pattern across the administration. Cuts to SNAP, cuts to Medicaid, cuts to rental and energy assistance, a callous lack of regard for the loss of affordable connectivity, and now barriers to Lifeline. This is not a war on poverty, it's a war on the poor. And here's what it means. It means higher bills for families who are already struggling. It means fewer households connected to jobs, to education, and to healthcare. It means this agency is turning away from its statutory mission of ensuring universal service. It doesn't have to be this way. This could have been a bipartisan victory for real good governance. As I said in my statement, I support seeking comment on ways to combat fraudulent behavior by companies, but not while also making it harder for eligible subscribers to participate in the program. The FCC should be defending free expression and protecting consumers. Instead, it is drifting further into political theater while working families pay the price. That is not the role of an independent agency, and it is not a direction we should accept. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Okay, I'm done.
Commissioner Gomez.
sorry. I'll go next.
Matt Danneman, Communications Daily. Do you anticipate that you and the other commissioners will be voting on Nexstar Tegna? Do you think this will be handled at the Bureau level? Do you have any sense which way the wind blows?
This should be voted at the commission level. It should absolutely not be done at the Bureau level. It's a new and novel issue. And it also is a very difficult issue because actually approving the transaction would be prohibited by the statutory cap on ownership. I heard what you heard.
Jeremy Barr from The Guardian. I mean, are you concerned that the FCC might be the one that's sort of instigating these investigations into networks? I mean, my understanding was that the candidates were supposed to be the ones making the complaints, and, you know, talking to some outside groups, they really hadn't made a complaint about The View. So the sort of origins of the View investigation in particular, then with Colbert, you know, it seemed like, I guess, CBS lawyers were trying to get ahead of a potential investigation. But do you feel the FCC should be the one that is sort of putting everybody on notice and then potentially launching these probes, or that that's not the way it's supposed to work under the equal time rule?
Is just one of a long pattern of this administration using the FCC to go after content it doesn't like. We have long established precedent on the applicability of the bona fide news exception to the equal time rule. And I think that the broadcasters had every reason to rely on that long-standing precedent. So what you are seeing is using and weaponizing our enforcement process in order to pressure broadcasters to self-censor. We saw that this week with CBS. And this is all part of a pattern getting to the same outcome. What's dangerous about this is the fact that this FCC wants to delve into content and editorial decisions by these broadcasters. Yes, we have an equal time rule. Yes, it is a part of our statute. And yes, we have a bona fide news exemption. The way that that news exemption works is if you have a program that is regularly scheduled, if that broadcaster or the independent producer controls that content, and if the broadcaster or that producer's decisions on format, content, and participants are based on newsworthiness rather than a motivation to help or hinder a particular candidate, then they are entitled to the bona fide news exemption. What this FCC is saying is, we want to delve into your decisions on this. And prior FCC precedent, if you look at the Jay Leno decision, the commission said, we defer to the judgment of the broadcaster on the newsworthiness of the program, because doing otherwise would threaten or would be an incursion into First Amendment violations. But this commission wants to make that investigation where it is going to challenge everything that these broadcasters are doing in order to make a finding, in the end, to pressure these media companies.
I think you've talked about, you know, there's lots of probes open right now. It's kind of hard to keep track of all the probes. Do you feel like that's part of the strategy is, you know, the threatening probes, but not necessarily kind of seeing action from those probes?
I do think that the threats are the point. The harassment is the point, because the commission is not going to survive appeal if it actually takes action against these broadcasters, because what it's doing is a violation of the First Amendment. So keeping everybody on their toes, forcing them to pay for lawyers, forcing them to respond to agency inquiries, it's all a part of the ultimate goal of bringing these broadcasters to heel. And we are seeing that, because now we are seeing that a program that most likely has a bona fide news exemption, again, it's contextual, and you have to look at the individual circumstances. But nevertheless, they've self-censored. I know there's a factual dispute between the broadcaster and the host of the program who are saying two different things, but in the end, they're both saying the same thing. We are concerned about this new thing with the FCC and the equal time rule, whether it was a complete bar from airing the program or it was a advice to comply with the rule. Right there, you are seeing self-censorship that is what the goal of this administration is. I could go on.
Commissioner Ted Johnson from Deadline. Two questions. One is the chairman just described the Colbert Tallarico incident as a hoax. What is your reaction to that? And also, on another matter, the Nexstar Tegna deal, the chairman just said that he supports it. What do you think about him, I guess, rendering a judgment on this merger before the FCC review has actually been completed?
As I mentioned, we have a factual dispute between the CBS and Colbert, the show itself. I don't think this FCC has made a finding about which of those factual disputes is actually correct, which of those facts under dispute is correct. With regard to the Nexstar Tegna proceeding, I don't know where we are in terms of we being the FCC, in terms of reviewing of the merger. I have made myself very clear that I don't see how this FCC can approve the merger without violating the statute, our Communications Act. So I will see what comes, but my fundamental premise or desire is that this be done at the commission level and not hidden at the bureau level.
Thank you.
Hi, Commissioner Diego Munoz from Punch Bowl.
Hi, Diego Munoz.
¿Cómo estás? Bien.
Muy bien, gracias.
So I want to ask, what is your response to those who are saying if Colbert had interviewed Tallarico by himself without airing the other candidates just days before the early voting starts in that race, wouldn't the show be giving that candidate an unfair advantage in that race? And then a second question on the Tegna Nexstar deal. What precedent would it open if the commission issued just a waiver to that transaction and not tackle the cap directly?
Trying to remember exactly how you asked the first question. So, let's start with the commission has had the equal time rule and the statute has had the equal time rule for a long time. Let's level set on that. And nothing really has changed since the commission adopted rules, since it's been taking its precedential actions. So under current precedent, what we have is the news exemption that applies to organizations that find that what they are doing is newsworthy. That was what the Leno case was all about. It was all about Arnold Schwarzenegger going on Leno and a competing candidate saying that he deserved equal time. Now, as our rules call for, that competing candidate came to the FCC and said, I've been denied equal time. And the FCC made a finding in that case, and it went through its analysis. And it said, yeah, Jay Leno is friends with Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's immaterial. The broadcaster determined that this was newsworthy, and it was newsworthy for a lot of reasons. One of them, that it's Arnold Schwarzenegger. So, I'm looking at our precedent and how this all applies. But one thing I want to make clear, it is true. Say the commission says, you know what? We're going to change our rules. And we're going to say that you have to be 60 minutes to qualify for the news exemption, and everyone else has to give equal time. What does that really mean? Let's talk about what happened with the NBC case that is still an open investigation of Kamala Harris going on Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live had Kamala Harris on for 2 minutes. Now, that was not actually an interview, it was a skit. So NBC did what it was supposed to do under the equal time rules. And the Trump campaign asked for equal time, and they got it. They got a minute at NASCAR, they got a minute at a football game. I would argue he probably got more audience reach through those 2 minutes than Saturday Night Live. But that is how the rules work. So the consequence, I want to keep just saying this, the threat, the environment, the fear is what is this administration is looking for. Because what you see when you look at the actual application of the equal time rule is really not that big of a deal. So let's focus on the big picture of the pattern of what we've seen under this administration when we talk about these issues.
Just on the precedent that the waiver would set on the next start.
Sorry. Not sure exactly what you're saying. The Bureau can't waive a statutory provision. I think it's very dangerous if we're going to start having bureaus waive statutory requirements. Statutory requirements, which by the way say you may not forbear from enforcing this particular cap. That is what the Communications Act says. So it's a very dangerous precedent if we're going to start using the Bureau unlawfully.
Hi, Commissioner.
Hey.
Chris Cole from Law 360. I just wanted to go back to Lifeline because I wanted to ask the same question about raising the support amount for eligible households. Whether you ever envision that being part of a proceeding, and also sort of related, are state broadband caps the way to go, price caps that is, considering that there's not any congressional action on an ACP replacement or on this Lifeline support amount?
Can you repeat the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
That there's no congressional action on an ACP replacement or a change in the Lifeline support amount.
Yeah. I would have supported including a question in the draft NPRM about whether we should increase the support amount. I would have also asked, what else can we do to improve the provision of service to eligible subscribers? But I was unable to get that edit into the draft. With regard to congressional action, we still have the bipartisan bicameral working group. I am truly hopeful that they will come up with with changes to the statute that will enable us to have a program more like the Affordable Connectivity Program, which was our most successful program in tackling the affordability challenges in our digital divide.
Thanks, Commissioner Dave Shepardson from Reuters. I wanted to ask you a technical question about the View and whether the FCC, what authority it has to investigate, right? I mean, and so under Section 315, is it required that an opposing candidate file within 7 days? I mean, does the FCC have independent authority to take action against for alleged equal time violations absent a candidate complaint? And I wanted to pose the same question I asked the chairman, which is, if you're CBS or NBC and you see that the View, is now subject to this investigation based on the interview, do you think the rest of the broadcasters should interpret that as, if there are any interviews with qualified candidates going forward, that they should expect the same type of investigation from the commission?
So I don't know what we are investigating with regard to the View. And you're right, the way that the rules work is a qualified candidate requests equal time. If they're denied that, they can come and they can file a complaint with the commission. So I don't know what violation of our rules is being alleged, because again, I don't know anything about this investigation. What's clear to me is that this commission really wants to delve into editorial decisions by the broadcasters. This invitation to file petitions for declaratory ruling that would say, here we think that this program is newsworthy and that it is not driven to favor or harm any one potential candidate. I don't know why I keep saying client. Candidate, I think is really troublesome. That is really asking to meddle into broadcasters' editorial decisions. And that is something the commission has avoided doing in the past. It has had to rule on these complaints, and it has done so, but it has really tried not to get into second guessing good faith, reasonable editorial decisions of whether something is newsworthy or not. Instead, what you are seeing is advice from counsel, either depending on who you believe, don't air it because it'll trigger the equal time rule, or it triggers the equal time rule.
Can I just ask, following up on Ted's question earlier about AM radio, and and so how do you think the commission should apply, this equal time philosophy to qualified candidate interviews on AM radio, for example, right? Do you think, is there a legal basis to treat sort of AM radio stations differently in terms of how you interpret whether they meet the bona fide news exemption versus, say, a daytime or nighttime TV program?
No, the equal time rules apply equally across broadcasters and radio. And we should apply them equally across broadcasters and radio. And we should respect the First Amendment across broadcasters on radio. There's plenty of content on radio I'm not particularly fond of, but that's why I don't listen to it. I have plenty of other outlets I can go to. Okay. Thank you.